So how do you make a proper Madam Web movie? You don't. Even calling Madam Web a supporting Spider-Man character is laughable, as she so seldom appears, and even then is incredibly uninteresting. But that being said, I've decided to take on the challenge of attempting to create the best possible pitch, utilizing as much of what Sony was trying, and failing, to do with their abomination of a movie as possible. While crafting this pitch, though, I held myself to certain stipulations. After all, it would be a cop-out to abandon any and all semblance of this film to more easily come up with a superior idea. For one thing, the movie they made was obviously intentionally female-led and celebrating girl power, so as much as some of you consider this pandering or an example of needless messaging, I incorporated this element into my own pitch as well, regardless of my own personal feelings on the matter. In addition, I made the decision not to include Peter Parker in this pitch, as it seems that as a result of Sony and Marvel's joint Spider-Man deal, Sony has either decided or agreed not to use the character in their solo movies, so I adhered to that as well. I also decided to uphold using Madam Web's visions as a means to drive the narrative forward. Many scenes within this upcoming pitch will have resemblances to what we ended up with in the Madam Web movie, but they are given more relevance and substance, not to mention logic. Just like in the movie, Madam Web, Julia Carpenter, Maddie Franklin, and Anya Corazon will all be starring characters in this pitch, along with Ezekiel as a crooked Spider-Man. These characters, unlike in the movie, will be portrayed more comics accurate, with Madam Web being elderly and Ezekiel not being relegated to being a one-dimensional villain. Julia will also be much older than the other girls, and the method to which they obtain their powers will be more reminiscent of how it was in the comic pages. The most glaring difference is that I'm shifting the point of view character to Anya instead of Madam Web. While Madam Web is still an important character in my pitch, with a similar plot to the movie, I just felt that Anya was a smarter lead with more interesting material to work with. With all that being said, on to the pitch. The movie would begin with a cold open featuring Ezekiel Sims's death at the hands of an obscured humanoid yet monstrous creature. This would be revealed to be a vision Madam Web has had that she is relating to him. Ezekiel would then frustratedly proclaim that their many preparations still aren't enough to offset his fate, and declares they need the Great Weaver to provide them with yet more allies to aid them. As he would stalk off, Madam Web would be visibly distressed. As we move into the first act, Anya Corazon would be introduced, living with single father Gil and attending Milton Summers High School alongside best friend Lynn and crush Paul. Gil, being a reporter, would casually be mentioned to be writing a story on Spider-Man's unnecessary brutality when apprehending criminals. Early on, the school would welcome new transfer student John Amun Casilla, and later on, while walking home after the conclusion of the school day, it would become clear to the audience that Anya is being stalked from afar by an unknown individual, unsettling her. One day, Anya would learn that Ezekiel has invited her AP Science class to have a field trip at his WebCore company headquarters, and during this field trip, the audience would see many Easter eggs of the larger Spider-Man mythos. Eventually, Ezekiel would privately approach Anya, speaking cryptically to her about destiny and a mysterious war approaching. He would also offer her an internship at WebCore, though she would politely decline this as a well-dressed woman walks up to Ezekiel and whispers something in his ear, causing him to excuse himself. On the way back to school, the children's school bus would be attacked by a small group of powerful individuals who would specifically target Anya. While Paul would prove cowardly, Amun would fight viciously to defend Anya and any other students in danger of being caught in the crossfire. Anya, quickly realizing herself to be the target of the attack, would flee the scene to lure the attackers away from her classmates. She would finally be cornered at a park, though would be saved by the timely arrival of a man named Miguel, who was the man previously seen to be stalking her. Miguel would use magical spells to incapacitate most of Anya's attackers until another mysterious individual, seemingly their leader, arrives. This new individual, whom Miguel addresses as Vincent and appears to be innately familiar with, triggers a magical spell of his own aimed at Anya. This spell would disintegrate his incapacitated comrades in its path toward Anya, but before it reaches the girl, Miguel would do his best to lessen its impact. Angrily, Miguel would unleash a flurry of magic at Vincent and the other attackers, driving them off, though when he would check on Anya, would find her critically injured and bleeding to death. He would then magically teleport them both away from the scene as a moon is shown observing from around a nearby corner. An interlude segment would take us to the home base of Anya's attackers, as Vincent would be shown reporting to a frail woman. He would tell her that their enemies have taken in the girl, though it doesn't seem that she is of any consequence. The frail woman would declare that the spiders are plotting something, but that it is currently the time for caution and continued observation, as they must not risk a misstep when they are so close to winning the war with them. Getting back to Anya, she would be shown waking up alone within the WebCorps headquarters. While getting her bearings, she would come to discover that she now has a sizable spider-like tattoo on her right arm. As she looks it over, a teenage girl slightly older than herself, alongside two younger kids, would excitedly enter the room. They would introduce themselves as Maddie Franklin, Bailey Briggs, and Rachel Carpenter, respectively. Anya recognizes Maddie as the missing daughter of her father's editor-in-chief, which the latter would confirm, but would correct her that he's actually her uncle. As the four of them would continue bonding, Maddie and Bailey would showcase extraordinary powers, assuming Anya to also have powers. When Anya admits that she doesn't, Rachel exclaims that she doesn't have any powers either. Maddie would explain to Anya the origin of her abilities were the result of an arcane ritual, while Bailey would reveal that his were due to an evil scientist kidnapping him and splicing his DNA with that of a spider. Anya questions why Maddie would participate in an arcane ritual, but the latter would humorously shrug it off as teen angst. Suddenly, Ezekiel would enter the room, alongside the woman who had interrupted his previous conversation with Anya. Rachel would immediately run to this woman, referring to her as her mother. Ezekiel would introduce the woman as Julia Carpenter. He would then reveal himself to be the dark-suited Spider-Man violently fighting crime across New York, and explains that all present are members of the Spider Society, a mystical gathering of individuals sworn to act per the will of a spider deity within the astral plane called the Great Weaver. According to him, WebCorps is the public face of the Spider Society, and all the employees are devoted to the cause. When Anya would bring up the war Ezekiel had mentioned during their initial meeting, Ezekiel would respond that the Spider Society are currently in a war with their sworn enemy, the Society of the Wasp, whose members include the attackers of her school bus. During this conversation, Ezekiel would have Julia reveal her own power set, and she would tell Anya that Ezekiel took her into the Spider Society years ago after being duped into agreeing to be experimented on by a group of mad scientists, and now acts as his head of security. With the explanations out of the way, Ezekiel would beg Anya to also join the Spider Society, but she declines, wanting to return to her mundane life. Being pressed, Anya grows frustrated, causing an insectoid-looking carapace to protrude from her new tattoo and wrap around her like armor. As Anya would react to this new development with shock and horror, Ezekiel would tell her that the tattoo having manifested on her body after a battle with the Society of the Wasp is proof of her connection to the web of life and destiny and rightful place alongside the Spider Society. Questioning what the web of life and destiny is, Anya is convinced to see Madam Web before refusing her destiny, as Ezekiel would reveal that it was Madam Web who had originally identified her with her own foresight ability as one such individual intertwined with this mysterious web of life and destiny. Madam Web, introducing herself to Anya, would explain that while born in a blind and broken body, she discovered at an early age that she had been chosen by the Great Weaver to be his prophet, bestowed with the power to perceive the web of life and destiny. She reveals that this grand web is strewn throughout the multiverse by the Great Weaver, connecting all those throughout it with association to the Spider Totem, the acolytes of the deity. Madam Web would state that by glimpsing the web of life and destiny, she is able to see selectively into the past, present, and future of those connected to the Spider Totem within their universe. Ezekiel would chime in that while Madam Web is the prophet to the Great Weaver, Anya's tattoo denotes her own role as the deity's hunter. Madam Web would then tell Anya that each of the roles the Great Weaver assigns his acolytes were preordained prior to their birth. she would reveal that Ezekiel, Julia, Maddie, Bailey, Miguel, and others within the Spider Society all have roles in service of the Great Weaver also. Anya would be told that just as Madam Web had glimpsed her within the web of life and destiny and brought her to Ezekiel's attention so that he might add her to the ranks of the Spider Society, so too had she done this over the years with the others as well. Eventually, Anya becomes tentatively convinced and agrees to join them. Elated, Ezekiel would have Julia drive Anya back home, though he would remain behind to converse privately with Madam Web. Ominously, he would ask her if she's received any further visions, but would be told that so far there has been none. But Madam Web would add that she doesn't need a vision to tell her that they will inevitably be damned for what they have done. Ezekiel would sharply retort that everything they have done has been for the good of the world. Anya, worried about her father's reaction to her prolonged absence, would hesitantly enter her home to find Miguel sitting down with her father, explaining away her tardiness and informing Gil that Anya has been chosen to begin an internship at WebCorp. We would now turn to Amun to see him conversing with Vincent, who chastises him for previously defending Anya. Amun would retort that he was told to observe her, not kill her, though Vincent would tell him that now that she is with the spiders, Amun would have to do his job as the hunter of the Society of the Wasp and eliminate Anya. As Act 2 unfolds, we would see that Anya has begun training under Ezekiel for future confrontations with the Society of the Wasp, who would partner her with Miguel, explaining that the hunter and mage are always partnered together. Alongside the training sessions, we would also periodically see Anya at school interacting with Lin and Amun, the latter of which would repeatedly ask about her supposed internship and covertly attempt to convince her to toss these new responsibilities aside, desperate to avoid having to slay her. During this segment of the movie, Ezekiel would reveal several key lore bits to Anya, including that the founders of the Society of the Wasp, including Vincent, were originally members of the Spider Society before being seduced by the promises of wealth and power from some new key player currently leading the Society of the Wasp. He would also explain that the Great Weaver was originally a member of an African spider clan named Anansi, the first mortal individual imbued with the totemic power of the spider totem. At some point, Anansi sacrificed his mortal existence to seal away the totemic power of the All-Mother, deity of the wasps, within a temple in Ghana and trapped her essence within the astral plane alongside himself in the form of the Great Weaver. Ezekiel would declare that the Society of the Wasp are currently after the totemic power of the All-Mother, though only the bearer of the totemic power of the Great Weaver residing within himself may access it. Another event that would occur within the course of the second act is that Anya would create a superhero costume for herself and join Ezekiel on a couple of his patrols. Though Ezekiel would have offered to have WebCorp create a costume for her, Anya, not being a fan of the costumes WebCorp created for Maddie, Bailey, and Julia, rejects this, though gladly accepts modified bolus discs and artificial technological legs they created for her to use in combat scenarios. While on the patrols with Ezekiel, now referring to herself as Araña, Anya would be shown visually disturbed by his brutality and at one point is forced to rein him in. Switching perspectives, Vincent and Amun would finally be officially revealed to be the mage-hunter combo of the Society of the Wasps. Together they would ambush Miguel while he is out with his lover and fellow WebCorp employee, Nina Smith. Though Miguel would put up a valiant counteroffensive, Vincent would launch a spell at Nina and Miguel would become severely wounded, intercepting it. Anya, Maddie, and Bailey would arrive at the scene just in time to save Miguel from a death blow and take over the fight. During this confrontation, Gil would show up amongst the surrounding spectators and Amun would take a cue from Vincent, interrupting Anya's pleas for him to walk away from the Society of the Wasp to attack Gil. A devastated Anya would be relieved to see Ezekiel as Spider-Man swing in alongside Julia and save her father's life. Once again, Vincent would prepare to retreat, citing that they already succeeded in destabilizing the spiders and must now capitalize on their victory, frustrating Amun. As they run, Ezekiel would pursue them despite Anya's pleas that they must focus on aiding Miguel instead. Nina would be revealed to have called WebCorp for aid, who would now arrive at the scene. As Nina and fellow employee Ted Mankowski get Miguel into a company vehicle to escort him to headquarters for medical attention, Miguel, having come to see Anya as a younger sister, would reveal to her that Ezekiel isn't what he seems and would encourage her to seek answers from Madame Web. Anya, frustrated by Ezekiel having abandoned Miguel to his fate, would convince Maddie, Bailey, and Julia to accompany her in getting answers from the elderly prophet. After some coaxing, Madame Web would reveal that Ezekiel, already having acquired vast amounts of wealth for himself, happened upon her during their youth while scouring the world for a greater purpose. She would admit that she became immediately seduced by his charisma and determination to break away from what many others would consider to be a cozy life of luxury. At some point, she began having visions of the approaching birth of the next inheritor of the totemic powers of the Great Weaver. But Ezekiel, wanting the individual's destiny for himself, would have gone to great lengths to prevent the birth. Madame Web would further explain that because she can perceive the web of life and destiny, she also has the ability to deviate their world line from it as well. And though she would never betray her trusted role within the Spider Society, unbeknownst to her at the time, the very act of relating the vision to Ezekiel would have dire consequences. Ezekiel had used his money and influence to persuade a man named Richard Parker to join WebCorps instead of joining the United States Army Special Forces, which would have inevitably led to him meeting and falling in love with a CIA translator and data analyst named Mary Fitzpatrick, thus preventing the birth of the true inheritor of the Great Weaver's totemic power. While this revelation is being said, it would be shown that a middle-aged employee of WebCorps, casually seen thus far, is actually a still-alive Richard. Madame Web would admit that ever since Ezekiel falsely gained the totemic powers of the Great Weaver, she's had visions of the Society of the Wasp bringing their All-Mother into the mortal plane of existence, who would proceed to slaughter every member of the Spider Society and spread her rule throughout the Earth. She would claim that Ezekiel periodically has her glimpse into the web of life and destiny in search of those entangled within to add to the Spider Society's numbers. But no matter how many he collected, the visions of the future remained the same. After relentless probing, Madame Web would hesitantly reveal that Ezekiel orchestrated the accidents that caused all their mutations for the sake of this pursuit, a claim which devastates all in attendance, particularly Julia. Here would be the greatest revelation. Anya wouldn't actually be the Great Weaver's hunter, as during the ritual Miguel performed to save her life, Ezekiel also had him magically graft the spider tattoo onto her, simulating the powers and abilities of the true hunter. This entire scene would be interspersed with footage of Ezekiel, still in pursuit of Vincent and Amun, falling into their trap. Numerous members of the Society of the Wasp would surround and eventually overwhelm him. Rendering him unconscious, they would state their intent to bring him to the temple in Ghana in order to access the All-Mother's totemic powers so that she may be brought forth into the mortal plane. Madame Web would suddenly get a vision of this very event occurring, resulting once again in Ezekiel's death at the hands of the All-Mother, and would relate this to Anya, Julia, Mattie, and Bailey. Still hurt by the revelation of Ezekiel's betrayal, and Anya questioning if she even has a place amongst the Spider Society anymore. They would be hesitant to step in until Madame Web utters the immortal words, "With great power comes great responsibility," which she would claim is a mantra riddled throughout the web of life and destiny. Considering this, the four young heroes would reluctantly realize that they must fulfill their destiny to thwart the schemes of the Society of the Wasp and save Ezekiel, regardless of their personal feelings. After reaching Ghana, courtesy of a WebCorps private jet, Anya, Julia, Mattie, and Bailey would find the Spider Clan devastated. The small number of survivors would lead them to the temple housing the All-Mother's totemic power, where they would find Vincent already in the process of extracting the totemic power of the Great Weaver from within a restrained Ezekiel, surrounded by Amun and numerous other lesser members of the Society of the Wasp. The heroes all would attempt to halt the extraction, but Amun and the other wasps would meet them in combat. After some time, the extraction would conclude, and Vincent would casually toss Ezekiel's semi-conscious body aside like garbage as the Great Weaver's totemic power would finish unsealing the All-Mother's own. Vincent would proceed to use it in the ritual to bring the Wasp deity into the mortal plane. Back at the Web Corps headquarters, doctors would inform Nina that Miguel's injuries are critical and his survival is up in the air. Overhearing this, Miguel would utter one final spell to transfer the majority of his remaining life force into Araña to supercharge her tattoo's power, activating in the girl what he and Nina refer to as the spirit of the hunter, greatly enhancing the tattoo's powers and abilities. Nina would tearfully cradle Miguel, knowing that his fate is now sealed. Expending great effort, Araña would utilize the spirit of the hunter to finally overcome Amun. But while in the throes of so much power and still infuriated by Amun's betrayal and previous attempt on her father's life, she would begin to strangle him to death, oblivious to Vincent having succeeded in summoning the All-Mother into the mortal plane. Miguel would telepathically link to Araña while dying, beseeching her not to become a murderer, causing her to snap out of her rage and release Amun. But as she would prepare to get back into the main fight, she would horrifyingly watch as the newly manifested All-Mother supposedly kills Ezekiel in the same way we would have previously seen from Madame Web's visions. She would then bemoan her powers not being at their normal levels so soon after her emergence within the mortal plane, and would drain numerous surrounding society of the Wasp underlings of their life forces to begin restoring her true strength. The heroes would furiously attack her as Vincent would reel off to the side from the strain the ritual had on his body. The All-Mother would easily thwart the assault and toss them all aside. She would then begin a relentless assault upon Araña, whose carapace's defenses would become the only thing keeping her alive. Unfortunately, the carapace would begin to crack as the assault persists. And as the All-Mother would prepare a powerful attack to finish it off, Miguel would finally tragically expire in Nina's arms, imparting to Araña his gratitude to her for allowing him to die with some measure of honor and humanity before he goes. He would apologize to her before his end for having given her the tattoo and putting her on the path to the hardships she's endured because of it. Miguel would also claim that his actions had been intended to protect someone, but before he could reveal this person's identity, he would die. With Miguel's passing, Anya's tattoo, along with her carapace, would vanish, but before the All-Mother's attack could connect, Julia would tackle her out of its path. Maddie and Bailey would do what little they could to distract the All-Mother with long-range attacks to give Araña and Julia time to breathe. Ezekiel, not quite dead, would break through the containment holding the greatly diminished totemic power of the Great Weaver, despite Vincent's efforts to stop him, wishing to reabsorb it into himself to join the battle against the All-Mother. To his horror, the released totemic power would drift away from Ezekiel and into Anya's body instead. Imbued with new and greater power, Araña would step in to battle the All-Mother once more in an increasingly one-sided fight. The All-Mother would command Vincent to give his life force to her for an additional boost, but he would refuse, apparently unwilling to die for the cause. As Araña would finally incapacitate the All-Mother, a rageful Julia would prepare to deliver a killing blow, but Araña would prevent this, saying that she wouldn't allow Miguel's sacrifice to be besmirched with further unnecessary loss of life. The heroes would gather around a dying Ezekiel. Araña would confront him about having orchestrated each of their origins and would claim that it wasn't his right to alter random kids' destinies for the sake of creating soldiers to fight a mystical and dangerous war just for the sake of his own survival. Ezekiel would counter that all of them were located by Madame Web on the web of life and destiny, so their destinies always included assuming roles within the Spider Society to help defend the world from the threat of the Society of the Wasp. He would claim that he simply tried to speed up their inclusion, but would apologize nonetheless for what he did before succumbing to his wounds within a pool of blood. Suddenly, an enraged Vincent would rise up from behind them and prepare to attack until a humanoid figure made up of thousands of spiders envelops him, having come through the rip in planes opened as a result of Vincent's ritual, at last putting an end to the evil mage's life. The figure would introduce himself as the gatekeeper totem of the spiders. He would look to Ezekiel's body and disdainfully say that he would have eventually came for him too if he continued to falsely hold the Great Weaver's totemic power. As the gatekeeper would take a step toward Anya, she would quickly recoil, but he would confirm that she has nothing to worry about from the spider totems, as she has been deemed worthy of the powers. Finally, the gatekeeper would pick up the All-Mother's body with the intent to return her to the astral plane, where he says he will imprison her once more under tighter security measures. He would temporarily pause, looking the All-Mother's body over, and would ask the heroes where the rest of her totemic powers are, causing alarm. The gatekeeper would tell them that the body he's carrying only has a fraction of its complete power. Bailey would suddenly pipe up that a moon is nowhere to be seen, and they collectively would realize he has absconded with the remainder of the power. Gatekeeper would go through the rip between planes with the All-Mother's body after assigning the heroes to capture the remaining totemic power of the All-Mother and return it to the astral plane as soon as they can. After an obvious time skip, Madame Web would be shown to have inherited Ezekiel's wealth and influence. She would gather Anya, Julia, Maddie, and Bailey, each in full costume, a grouping that would brand themselves as the Web Warriors. They would discuss their purpose of protecting New York City in Spider-Man's absence, while also hunting down the remaining totemic power of the All-Mother. As they would depart Madame Web's newly acquired WebCorps headquarters, Nina would approach the elderly prophet to discuss the new direction of the Spider Society. The back of Nina's top would blow up to the camera to reveal a large spider tattoo on her back, denoting herself as the true hunter of the Spider Society, as the film would come to an end with a monologue from Anya. During a mid-credits scene, a moon would be shown presenting the frail leader of the Society of the Wasp with the All-Mother's totemic powers, making her youthful and energetic. She would reveal her actual identity as Shathra, true mother of the Wasps, and would state that as soon as her strength is fully restored, they will make plans to rebuild the Society of the Wasp bigger and better than ever, for the sake of crushing the Spider Society once and for all. A final post-credits scene would close out the movie, featuring Ezekiel, mysteriously revealed to be alive, sneaking into the WebCorps headquarters. Clearly still injured, he would hobble toward a hidden chamber and unlock the multiple high-tech security measures to access its contents. A weakened girl named Cindy Moon. Well, there you have it. This is my longest video I've ever made, taking me nearly a full month to complete. But it's finally done. So what did you all think? Personally, as I stated at the beginning, Madame Web should have never been allowed to have been made, and there's not much anyone can do to fix it. This pitch, however, in my opinion, shapes it into the best possible product possible without throwing everything in the garbage and crafting an entirely new concept from the ground up. It also tells the story of Araña's origin story fairly faithfully, while dropping in tidbits from J. Michael Straczynski's amazing 2001 to 2010 run of The Amazing Spider-Man and the Spider-Girl segment of the 2011 Spider Island storyline. Araña is one of my top 2 Spider Family characters, not just because my best friend and the thumbnail artist for my videos is half Mexican and half Puerto Rican too, alongside Spider-Man India. I will leave a list of the direct source material I pulled from in the video description if you are at all interested. Obviously, there are pieces of Araña's story I intentionally left out, such as Felix Jade and everything in relation to Anya's mother. This will be left for a sequel that I obviously teed this pitch up for. Anya's story is sizable, and so as not to overstuff a single movie, I decided to split my Araña concept into 2 films, in addition to the numerous spin-offs this pitch sets up. I'm saving the aforementioned plots for the second and concluding chapter of Araña's story. While the title of this movie would be Tales from the Spider-Verse, Araña, the title of the sequel would be Araña, Heart of the Spider. One of the things I really set out to do with a Spider-Man less spider-adjacent movie was give a reason for Peter not to be in Sony's series of movies, instead of his absence being super obvious and distracting. And the result is the explanation that they are living in a tampered timeline, creating a sort of what-if shared universe, which I feel could be especially intriguing, especially if the overall plan is to eventually do an inheritors-led storyline across various Spider universes. Also, in addition to the various Spider-Man supporting characters set up, I would also make mention of Jessica Drew being a part of the Spider Society as well, though either on maternity leave or in some other part of the world on behalf of WebCorps. Let me know in the comments what you think about this idea. Sure, you could just simply say, nah, just leave Madam Web alone and move on entirely. But where's the fun in that? Videos like this and my previous Joker 2 pitch are what I really want to do with this channel, so I'm hoping you are all receptive to it. Anyway, while the Araña 2, Silk, Venom, Morbius, and Craven pitches will all undoubtedly be made in the near future, the next pitch I'm going to tackle will be a pitch for how to incorporate a young, comics-accurate Robin within the Matt Reeves Batverse, while keeping in with the tone and progression of the Batman and Penguin projects. After that will be a redo pitch for Batman Forever, so if you like this video and/or are intrigued by future concepts I'll be tackling, then give this video a like and subscribe to this channel. With all that being said, check out the upper video on the left-hand side for my redo pitch for the Joker 2, and check out the lower video to see my pitch for how the MCU should tackle the mutant saga. Ciao for now, friends.